The Aztec Empire, the incredible rise of the greatest civilization in ancient America, the city that shouldn't exist. Tonight, I'd like to tell you a story that sounds almost impossible. Imagine standing on the edge of a peaceful lake just as the sun begins to rise. The morning mist slowly drifts away, and suddenly an enormous city appears before your eyes. Towering white temples reach into the sky. Thousands of wooden canoes glide silently through sparkling canals. Crowded marketplaces buzz with life. The smell of fresh food fills the air, while the sound of drums echoes across the water. If you didn't know better, you might think you were looking at a dream. But this city was real. Its name was Tenochtitlan, the heart of the mighty Aztec Empire. When Spanish explorers first laid eyes on it in 1519, many later admitted they couldn't believe such a magnificent city existed. Some even wondered if they were dreaming. Yet here's the most incredible part. Just 2 centuries earlier, the people who built this city had no kingdom, no great army, and no place they could truly call home. So how did a wandering tribe become one of the most powerful civilizations in the ancient world? Well, that's exactly where our story begins. A tribe without a home. Long before the Aztecs ruled an empire, they were simply a people searching for a home. They called themselves the Mexica. No grand cities, no magnificent temples, no treasures of gold, only families, warriors, priests, and an unshakable belief that one day their destiny would reveal itself. For years, they wandered across the rugged valleys and mountains of central Mexico. The journey was exhausting. Days turned into months, and months became years. Many went hungry. Some lost hope. Children grew into adults without ever knowing what it felt like to have a permanent home. But the priests kept repeating the same promise. Our God, Huitzilopochtli, has already chosen our future. We simply haven't reached it yet. Then came the prophecy. They were told to keep searching until they found an eagle standing proudly on a cactus, holding a snake in its beak. To anyone else, it sounded impossible, but to the Mexica, it was a sign from the gods. They refused to stop searching. They believed that somewhere ahead, their destiny was waiting. And when that moment finally arrived, history would change forever. The sign that changed everything. Then, one quiet morning, everything changed. As the first rays of sunlight spread across Lake Texcoco, one of the scouts suddenly stopped. He pointed toward a small rocky island in the middle of the lake. Everyone turned to look. There, standing proudly on top of a cactus, was a magnificent golden eagle. In its beak, it held a snake. For a moment, no one spoke. The priests fell to their knees. The warriors lowered their weapons. Families embraced each other with tears in their eyes. After years of endless wandering, they believed they had finally found the sign their God had promised. "This is our home," one elder whispered. In the year 1325, the Mexica began building a city on that tiny island. Many neighboring tribes laughed at them. "A city in the middle of a lake?" they said. "It will never survive." But the Mexica didn't listen. They believed that faith was stronger than fear. Stone by stone, wooden beam by wooden beam, they built what would become one of the greatest cities the world had ever seen. That city was called Tenochtitlan. And centuries later, the eagle standing on a cactus became the national symbol of Mexico, a reminder of the moment when a wandering people found their destiny. But building a city on a lake was only the beginning. Building the impossible city. Imagine being told to build one of the greatest cities in the world in the middle of a lake. Most people would have called it impossible. The Mexica called it their destiny. There was no solid ground beneath their feet, only shallow water and muddy islands. So they did something extraordinary. They drove thousands of wooden poles deep into the lake bed, creating a strong foundation. Layer by layer, they added stone, soil, and reeds until new land began to rise above the water. Then they built wide causeways that connected the island to the mainland. Instead of streets filled with horses and wagons, graceful canals carried thousands of wooden canoes loaded with food, pottery, flowers, and people. To feed their growing city, the Mexica created one of the most ingenious farming systems in history. They built chinampas, artificial islands often called floating gardens. These fertile fields produce corn, beans, squash, tomatoes, and chili peppers in astonishing quantities. Season after season, the harvest kept growing. The city flourished. What had once been a lonely island slowly transformed into a masterpiece of engineering. Visitors from distant lands couldn't believe what they were seeing. Some would later describe Tenochtitlan as one of the most beautiful cities on earth. And yet, this was only the beginning of the Aztecs' incredible rise to power. The warriors who built an empire. As Tenochtitlan grew stronger, the world around it began to change. The Mexica were no longer a small tribe struggling to survive. They had become fearless warriors. From an early age, every boy was taught that courage was more than a virtue, it was a duty. They learned to fight with wooden swords lined with razor-sharp obsidian blades, weapons so sharp they could cut through flesh with terrifying ease. The most respected fighters earned legendary titles. Some became eagle warriors, wearing feathered helmets that symbolized the power of the sky. Others became jaguar warriors, dressed in fierce-spotted armor that struck fear into their enemies. But the Aztecs didn't fight only to conquer land. Every victory brought new allies, valuable tribute, and greater influence across central Mexico. Cities that surrendered peacefully often kept their own rulers, but they were required to send yearly tribute to Tenochtitlan: gold, cacao beans, cotton, precious feathers, food, and skilled craftsmen. With every campaign, the empire grew richer. With every victory, the name of the Aztecs spread farther across the land. Soon, people from distant kingdoms whispered the same words: "Do not underestimate the warriors of Tenochtitlan." Yet, even as the empire reached new heights, an even greater challenge was waiting beyond the horizon. Across a vast ocean, strangers were already on their way. A city of wealth and wonder. By the early 1500s, Tenochtitlan had become one of the largest and most impressive cities on earth. Every morning, long before the sun reached its highest point, the city came alive. Thousands of canoes glided silently through the canals, carrying fresh vegetables, flowers, fish, and handmade goods. At the heart of the city stood the great marketplace of Tlatelolco. Imagine walking through a market where more than 40,000 people gathered in a single day. Merchants sold colorful cotton cloth, shining obsidian blades, cacao beans, rare feathers, pottery, spices, jewelry, and food from every corner of the empire. The marketplace was surprisingly well organized. Judges watched over every transaction. Cheating was punished. Weights and prices were carefully monitored, helping trade run smoothly. To many visitors, it felt more like a modern commercial center than an ancient marketplace. Above it all stood the towering temples of Tenochtitlan, their white walls glowing under the bright Mexican sun. From the top of those pyramids, priests looked out over a city that seemed almost endless. The Aztecs believed they had built the greatest city in the world, and for a moment, it truly seemed that nothing could ever bring it down. But history has a way of changing when you least expect it. Far beyond the eastern horizon, unfamiliar ships were crossing the ocean, carrying men who had never seen the Aztec world, and whose arrival would change it forever. The arrival of the strangers. In the spring of 1519, something appeared on the eastern horizon that no Aztec had ever seen before. At first, they looked like strange white birds floating across the sea. But as they came closer, the truth became clear. They were enormous wooden ships, unlike anything the people of the Aztec Empire had ever imagined. On board were just a few hundred Spanish explorers, led by a determined man named Hernán Cortés. They carried steel swords, powerful crossbows, early firearms, and horses, animals the Aztecs had never seen. To the Mexica, the sight was both fascinating and terrifying. Messengers raced to Tenochtitlan with unbelievable news. "Great Lord," they told Emperor Montezuma, "strangers have arrived from across the sea." Montezuma listened carefully. Some of his advisors believed these newcomers were ordinary men. Others feared they might be connected to ancient prophecies. No one knew for certain, but one thing was clear. The peaceful world the Aztecs had built was about to face its greatest test. The decisions made in the coming days would determine the fate of an empire. And soon, the roads leading to the magnificent city of Tenochtitlan would carry visitors unlike any the Aztecs had ever welcomed before. The meeting that changed history. On November 8th, 1519, two worlds finally met. As the morning sun reflected across the waters of Lake Texcoco, thousands of Aztec citizens lined the great causeway leading into Tenochtitlan. They stood in complete silence. Everyone wanted to see the mysterious strangers who had come from across the sea. At the front of the procession stood Emperor Montezuma II. He wore an elegant cloak decorated with brilliant green quetzal feathers and shimmering gold ornaments. To his people, he wasn't just a ruler. He was the living symbol of the Aztec Empire. Walking toward him was Hernán Cortés, a Spanish commander who had traveled thousands of miles in search of wealth, glory, and opportunity. For a brief moment, the two men looked into each other's eyes. Neither of them could have imagined how much that single meeting would change history. Montezuma welcomed the visitors with gifts of fine cotton, precious jewelry, and magnificent featherwork, a gesture of diplomacy and respect. Cortés accepted the gifts with a smile. But behind that smile, he was carefully studying the city. Its towering temples, its endless canal, its bustling markets, and above all, its unimaginable wealth. He realized that Tenochtitlan was unlike any city the Spanish had ever seen. It was beautiful, it was powerful, and it was filled with riches. Yet beneath the polite greetings, both sides were hiding uncertainty. The Aztecs wondered if these newcomers could be trusted. The Spanish wondered how such a magnificent empire could be conquered. Neither side knew it yet. But the friendship they displayed that day would soon give way to fear, conflict, and one of the most dramatic chapters in world history. The emperor becomes a prisoner. At first, everything appeared peaceful. The Spanish were welcomed into the heart of Tenochtitlan. They admired the city's beauty, explored its markets, and marveled at its towering temples. But beneath the surface, distrust was growing. Hernán Cortés knew that his small force of only a few hundred men could never defeat the mighty Aztec Empire in open battle. So he made a decision that shocked everyone. He secretly seized Emperor Montezuma. Without warning, the most powerful ruler in the Americas became a prisoner inside his own palace. The emperor was treated with respect, but he was no longer free. Every order he gave was watched. Every visitor was monitored. Outside the palace walls, rumors spread quickly. How could our great emperor be held captive by a handful of strangers? Anger began to grow throughout the city. The people who had once welcomed the Spanish now looked at them with suspicion. The streets of Tenochtitlan, once filled with celebration, became filled with whispers, fear, and growing rage. The peace between the two worlds was beginning to fall apart, and soon one single spark would ignite a rebellion that would shake the entire Aztec Empire. The city erupts in revolt. The tension inside Tenochtitlan could no longer be contained. Every day more people gathered in the streets. They whispered that the Spanish had betrayed their emperor. Then everything exploded. During an important Aztec religious festival, Spanish soldiers attacked a crowd of unarmed nobles and priests. The music stopped. The celebrations turned into screams. Within moments, the sacred courtyard became a scene of panic and bloodshed. News spread through the city like wildfire. The Spanish have attacked! Thousands of Aztec warriors rushed into the streets. Bridges were destroyed, canals became battlefields, arrows and spears rained down from rooftops. The Spanish suddenly found themselves trapped inside the very city they had hoped to control. Desperate to calm the people, Cortés brought Emperor Montezuma onto the palace rooftop. The emperor pleaded with his people to stop fighting, but the crowd no longer listened. Some believed he was speaking under Spanish control. Others believed he had failed to protect the empire. Stones and spears flew through the air. Soon afterward, Montezuma was dead. Even today, historians debate exactly how he died. Some accounts claim he was struck by his own people. Others suggest he was killed while in Spanish custody. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. The death of Montezuma marked the beginning of the end for the mighty Aztec Empire. The greatest battle was still to come, and neither side would leave unchanged. La Noche Triste, the night of sorrows. The Spanish knew they could not stay in Tenochtitlan any longer. The city had turned against them. Food was running low. Every bridge, every rooftop, every canal was guarded by determined Aztec warriors. So Cortés made a desperate decision. Under the cover of darkness on the night of June 30th, 1520, the Spanish quietly slipped out of the city. For a brief moment, it seemed their escape might succeed. But then they were discovered. The silence shattered. War drums thundered across the lake. Conch shells echoed through the night. Thousands of Aztec warriors rushed toward the causeways. Arrows darkened the sky. Spears struck from every direction. Many Spanish soldiers, weighed down by stolen gold, fell into the lake and disappeared beneath the water. The retreat became a disaster. Hundreds of soldiers and many of their allies never escaped. The Spanish would forever remember that terrible night as La Noche Triste, the night of sorrows. But the story was far from over. Cortés survived, and he was already planning to return, the fall of an empire and a legacy that lives on. 1 year later, Cortés returned. This time, he did not come alone. He brought thousands of indigenous allies who had long been enemies of the Aztecs. He surrounded Tenochtitlan. He blocked its roads. He cut off its food and fresh water. Then came another invisible enemy, smallpox. The deadly disease spread through the city with terrifying speed. People became too weak to fight. Families were devastated. The empire that had once seemed unstoppable was slowly collapsing. For nearly 3 months, the defenders fought with incredible courage. Street by street, bridge by bridge, canal by canal, they refused to surrender. But on August 13th, 1521, Tenochtitlan finally fell. One of the greatest cities in the ancient Americas was left in ruins. The Aztec Empire had come to an end, yet its story did not disappear. Today, beneath the streets of modern Mexico City, the foundations of Tenochtitlan still rest. Archaeologists continue to uncover temples, sculptures, and ancient treasures that remind us of the brilliance of this remarkable civilization. And every time the Mexican flag waves in the wind, it carries the symbol of the eagle standing on a cactus with a snake in its beak, the same legendary sign that inspired the Mexica to build their extraordinary city centuries ago. The empire may have fallen, but its spirit never truly vanished. It lives on in history, in culture, and in the hearts of millions. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the incredible story of the Aztec Empire. If you enjoyed this adventure through history, don't forget to subscribe, because our next journey will uncover another lost civilization and another mystery waiting to be discovered. Until next time, thank you for watching.